Jackson would become more reclusive, retreating into his Neverland ranch. There he continued to surround himself with children in a make-believe paradise where he could relive his childhood.
He repudiated the adult world. For him, it was a world of betrayal.
But in 1993, disturbing allegations surfaced concerning Jackson's association with children. A 13-year-old boy filed a lawsuit accusing the singer of sexually molesting him. Jackson vehemently denied the accusation on national TV.
I ask all of you to wait and hear the truth before you label or condemn me. Don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent.
The case was eventually settled for nearly $20 million, and the suit was dropped in 1994. But Jackson's reputation was seriously damaged. Less than a year later, Jackson made headlines again when he married Lisa Marie Presley, the 26-year-old daughter of Elvis.
It was quite obvious to all of us from the beginning that it was a sham, that it was a publicity stunt, and it was just kind of disgusting and silly. Even from the beginning, when they're nervously holding hands at MTV, and he says, nobody thought this would last, and then he goes to kiss her. But she's clearly like, whoa, what are you doing?
The marriage collapsed less than 2 years after the wedding. Presley filed for divorce in 1996. On the day after his death, Presley wrote on her blog that Jackson always thought he'd die early like her father. As Jackson's marriage began to crumble, so did his career. Filled mostly with past hits and some new angry songs like Scream, 1995's History, Past, Present, and Future could not revive Jackson's success in the studio. Then in 1996, Jackson sent shockwaves around the world when it was announced he had married Debbie Rowe, his dermatologist's nurse.
The thing about Michael is that he does want what he wants, and he will find a way to get it. She offered to have a child for him. And as unconventional as it is, if you really look at it, it's sort of surrogate motherhood.
Rowe gave birth to their son, Prince Michael Jackson, in 1997. A year later, the couple had a baby daughter, Paris Michael Catherine. And in 1999, they divorced. Jackson was granted full custody of the children. In 2002, he incited worldwide outrage when he dangled his newborn son, Prince Michael II, from a balcony of a Berlin hotel.
When he dangles the baby, it's just, here's Michael again being the class clown who doesn't even realize that he's the class clown. And he thinks he's being loving. I mean, you know, it's sort of like the anti-King Midas, like everything he wants to do just gets screwed up.
Just a year later, Jackson was catapulted back into the limelight when he was featured in the Martin Bashir documentary, Living with Michael Jackson. In the show, 44-year-old Jackson admitted to letting children sleep with him in his bed at Neverland.
It's not sexual. We're going to sleep. I tucked them in. I put a little music on, into a little storytelling. I read a book.
Author and self-proclaimed psychic Uri Geller was a friend of Jackson's. He said he urged the singer to keep children out of his bedroom.
I was the only person that had the chutzpah to scream at him and tell him that this business of inviting children to his bedroom is wrong. And Michael just stared at me.
It showed him to be quite abnormal.
About that?
You bought that?
About this one? This one?
Almost pathological in his spending ways, and worst of all, a potentially terrible father.
Okay, here we go. Abu!
That documentary triggered bombshell news that thrust the faded pop star back into the spotlight. Just 9 months after the show aired, the 13-year-old cancer patient featured in the documentary accused Jackson of sexual abuse.
There will be charges filed against Mr. Jackson, multiple counts.
The fact that he could even find himself in this situation after the 93 allegations shows that he didn't take that sufficiently to heart. Because if he did, he never would have been alone with a child.
Although Jackson denied the abuse allegations, he was arrested and charged with 7 counts of child molestation. In 2005, Michael Jackson would go to trial and face, perhaps, the toughest 6 months of his life. January 16, 2004. It seemed like another classic Michael Jackson performance, surrounded by screaming fans. But this time, Jackson's stage was the roof of an SUV outside the Santa Barbara County Courthouse. After nearly a decade of being suspected of child molestation, the king of pop was about to face the music.
I was trying my best to get him down. I knew it wouldn't look right. I knew it wasn't appropriate.
Ben Brafman was one of Jackson's attorneys.
I recognized that, this is Michael Jackson. He's a 12-year-old superstar with thousands of people shrieking and screaming. He was trying to not affect the legal proceedings in any way. I think he was responding to his fans by at least showing them his face.
CNN's Jeffrey Toobin was in the courtroom.
This was certainly the most bizarre criminal trial I ever saw. Every day, Michael Jackson showed up in one of his Captain Crunch outfits, and he just didn't look like anyone else you'd ever met.
Michael Jackson was officially charged with 7 counts of child molestation and several other felonies. He pleaded not guilty.
The criminal charges were not a total surprise because several years earlier, Jackson had settled a civil claim against him by a boy under very similar circumstances.
But Brafman says the superstar was terrified.
We were alone in a room, and it was the first time I really had an opportunity to be completely alone with him, because in all other meetings there were a whole entourage present. There were dozens of lawyers and bodyguards and assistants, and without warning, he just broke down and began to sob, and we were sitting very close, and he actually collapsed on my shoulder, and he was sobbing.
It would take a year before a jury was seated and the trial began. The circus surrounding the trial seemed more than Jackson could bear. The superstar seemed to be fading in front of the world's eyes.
He was emaciated. He didn't exchange words with his lawyers very often. And as the trial progressed, he got weaker and weaker, including that one bizarre day when he called in sick and the judge said, "Come in anyway," and Jackson showed up in court in his pajamas.
It was March 10, 2005, the second day of testimony by Jackson's teenage accuser.
I feared for Michael Jackson, not that the trial was going to end badly, but that something would happen to Michael. When I saw that spectacle, I realized that my concerns about his frailty, about his physical issues, and emotional instability were even more well-founded.
It took a terrible toll.
No comment.
Thomas Mesereau was Jackson's lead defense attorney, walking Jackson into the courtroom nearly every day.
And I think this trial and this entire case took a terrible toll on him emotionally and physically.
Were you worried that he might not make it?
I was on occasion. Sometimes he would call me at 3 in the morning crying, terrified about what would happen to his children. On verdict day, he looked like death warmed over. It was just sad. His cheeks were sunken in. He could hardly smile. He looked horrible.
It was June 13, 2005. After more than 2 months of testimony, 135 witnesses, and 7 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Followed by news helicopters and a convoy of cars, Jackson rushed from Neverland Ranch to the courthouse. He was greeted by a crush of reporters and fans. It was a kind of attention and screams he was accustomed to, but his face was expressionless.
The people of the state of California, plaintiff versus Michael Joe Jackson, defendant, not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child.
With each not guilty verdict, the crowd outside cheered.
I just looked at him and hugged him, and he just said, "Thank you, thank you." He was very placid. He was very, very controlled. He sat there on a daily basis, watching accusations hurled at him, suggesting that he was an insensitive monster, and I know that it tore him to pieces. He survived it with 14 acquittals, but was damage done to his soul, to his spirit, to his gentle, kind way of looking at the world? I suspect so.